Greenville? All right. So my name's Ryan Sechik. I usually have the opportunity to serve the youth when I'm here, so I'm so excited to be here today. Just to speak to you guys, we got the youth in here with us today. That makes me feel more comfortable. Yeah, right up front. Like, you guys sit up here so I can look at you guys when I'm getting like those guilt-ridden sentences and stuff. So really, the cool thing is, and some of you guys probably know this, some of you may not know this, but Bobby and Shay are my in-laws. Right? And when you hear that word in-laws, sometimes there's like these negative connotations that come with it. Right? And there's usually like a joke that follows. And if I'm to be completely honest, I can't relate to that in the least bit. Like, in all honesty, Bobby and Shay are two of my mentors. They're my best friends in life. Like, I work with them here at GCC. They watch my kids for me. So I've got 3 kids. All right, so the ages of 5, 3, and 9 months old. So it is a crazy household all the time. And they watch our kids for us. They are awesome. They're our friends. But you guys have unique leaders here at this church. I want you guys to know that you can be confident in who they are. And don't take my word for it, because I'm biased, right? I'm biased. They're Mimi and Pops to my kids. But they are the best Mimi and Pops. And they are the best at doing ministry. They absolutely love you guys. They have served this community for like 20 years plus. They have been here, and they have been through the thick and through the thin with some of you. And some of you know them really well. And here's the thing, is we don't get an opportunity to do this very much. So I want to make sure that they know how much we appreciate them, right? So Bobby does this editing of the videos that he puts online and everything. So we're going to let them know how much we appreciate them, right? So we're going to give a round of applause, like this big, like awesome round of applause as Bobby's editing, so much so that he's going to go get Shay and be like, look at what they did for me, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to see how loud you all can get. We're going to see if you guys are actually awake this morning. And if you're not, then it's going to wake up the person that's sleeping next to you, because they might be there already. And if you're there already sleeping, then you're going to be woken up, at least for a few minutes. All right, so we're going to cheer on, and we're going to give the biggest scream, the biggest woo, whatever that noise is. If you do that Ric Flair, woo, you're going to do that. If you do whatever it is, if you girls, you got that high-pitched scream like you're scared, yeah, or whatever. All right, so on the count of 3, we're going to give this big shout, right, for them, and then we're going to get started. All right, so ready? Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Woo! So now that I got the part of the message out of the way that Bobby wrote for me, we can go on. I'm just kidding. Am I? Yeah, that's the real question. So don't look at me like that, Tanner. I'm just kidding. You didn't really write that for me. I said that all on my own. But I did do it because I'm kind of going to go into a story real quick, and so maybe you won't judge me as harshly when you hear this story, because, anyway, you'll see. All right, so I'm going to break it down. So I was getting to the place where I was going to preach for Bobby, right? And so he actually gave me a lot of leeway. Sometimes he gives me like 2 weeks. He's like, hey, you want to preach? I'm like, no, man, come on. Give me a little bit of time. So he gave me a lot of time this time. And I just happened to be praying about, thinking about it. I was like, okay, it's getting close. I need to kind of get it figured out. Yeah, get focused. Exactly. Skip on it. So I was like, man, I got to get this message down. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'll just send him a text real quick to ask him when I'm preaching. So I just sent him a text real fast. I said, hey, what day do you need me to preach again? Now, here's the thing. Now, I'm going to break this down for you before we go any further. You see my text message up there to him. I, in my mind, had, for some reason, I don't know why, but I had March 8th in my mind. Right? March 8th. I'm like, March 8th, the 8th of March. Right? And so I'm looking, I'm like, March 8th. And I'm like, wait a second. I don't remember there being a conflict when he asked me. And I look on my calendar, and I'm working at the firehouse on March 8th. And then I'm thinking, well, okay, so I don't remember there being this conflict. So obviously I have the day wrong. So I throw this up. Hey, man. And hoping just to get back like hey, this is the day you're preaching. Yada, yada. Right? So he says, this Sunday, stop joking with me. And at this point, okay, this is Thursday, February 6th. Now I want this go into my mind with me. February 6th, it's Thursday. I have just now started thinking like, oh, I'm preaching here in about a month. I need to start preparing. And he throws this to me. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I was like, and I throw back to him, you're an idiot. Stop joking with me. And then after that, there's this texting silence. Anybody know what texting silence is? You don't know? See? Because texting silence is there's not those little dot bubble things. And I'm waiting. So I'm sitting with my phone in hand. I'm like, you're an idiot. Stop joking with me. Bobby? And And then I'm like, hello? So now my brain starts rolling. I'm going to take you into my brain for a second. So my brain starts going, and I'm like, okay, so March 8th. Wait a second. It's February 6th. It's Thursday. This Sunday would be the 9th. The 9th and the 8th are a day apart. The 9th and the 8th look a lot alike if you write them. The 9th and the 8th. I'm preaching this Sunday. I start freaking out a little bit. And so in my freak out moment, I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm seriously just sitting here like, he needs to type back. So I'm like, he told me somewhere. And I'm looking through emails. I'm going through stuff to try to find where he told me when I was preaching. So in this terrible waiting process, right, this excruciating waiting process, I go and I'm sitting on the couch, and I kind of tell Chastity, I'm like, hey, so, and I'm looking for reassurance here, okay? Guys out there, is your wife the calendar keeper? Anybody have that? Wife is the calendar keeper. She tells you when you're doing what you're doing. Well, that's Chastity. So normally I go to her, and I figured she would know. She'd be like, yeah, you're preaching on such and such date. So I'm like, hey, so I'm preaching for Bobby, and he said I'm preaching this Sunday. And I'm hoping she'll be like, no, he's just messing with you. And so I'm sitting on the couch, and she's in the dishes, doing the dishes, and she goes, well, what did he say? I said, he said, this Sunday, stop joking with me. And I wrote back, you're an idiot. Stop joking with me. And then I waited like 10 minutes, and he still hasn't said anything. And then I put, you better be, hoping to cue it, like maybe he forgot. He got something that went on and he forgot. So I did like the you better be, so his phone would go off again and he'd see it, and then I was hoping the bubbles would come in. I said, and he hasn't said anything yet. I'm like, I think I'm preaching. And she responds in the same way that I respond. You can see, that's why I said I wanted to give all that praise to Bobby and Shay. She responds, as she's at the dishes, she goes, you're an idiot. She said, if you were supposed to be preaching this Sunday, she's like, you better get a message together. She's like, you need to be more responsible, right? So she's doing the opposite of what I was looking for. I'm looking for some reassurance, and I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not good. So then I get back after like 45 excruciating minutes. Here he goes. We all LOL. So obviously, I wasn't preaching February 9th. And then I go ahead and tell him this. He says March 1st. So here I am. Today's March 1st for those of you that didn't know. Right? So March 1st. We got an extra day this year, which we get every 4 years. And then I tell her the story of, you had me going for a minute there. Chastity said, and I quote, and so this is true because I wrote this right away, so this was easy to quote her. This is really what she said. You're an idiot. You need to be more responsible. If it is this week, you're preaching, and it is your own fault. All right. So here I am. It wasn't that day. It wasn't February 9th. I had some time to prepare, but it did check me a little bit. All right. So as you can see, we're in this faith series, right? You guys are in this faith series with Bobby, and through this faith series, you guys have been talking about faith. And I just wanted to throw this out there because I have lost a little bit of my faith right now in Bobby, right? So, but also, usually it's there. The reason I responded so quickly with you idiot, or you're an idiot, is because he messes with me a lot. And that's actually a term of endearment. So if you guys still are judging me, I'm calling him an idiot. My wife called me an idiot. You guys, if you want to get a cup of coffee after this, we can. But anyway, we're going to open now with prayer. And if you guys would just bow your heads with me. God, we are in this series about faith, God. And I know for me that this is a topic that hits home. This is a topic that I think hits home for all of us as believers. We struggle sometimes with our faith. If we're to be completely honest, there's seasons in life where faith is more particularly difficult to deal with than others. And God, as we go through this story today, I pray, Lord, that you would be here with us. God, that you would be in this room, that you would be in this message, that you would be in my words that I'm speaking to them, God, and that most of all, that you would transcend those words, that you would reach the hearts of those here listening. God, we pray for your word, we pray for your truth, because we know in that there is power. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. So we are starting we're going to go into this story, a very familiar passage for most of you guys. If you've been in church at any time, you've probably heard this story. It's found in actually 3 of the Gospels. We're going to mainly be focused on the Gospel of Matthew. If you guys have your Bibles out, this is time to pull them out. As I've heard, and I've been listening to the message, Bobby's been diving really deep into the scriptures, right? So we're going to have those Bibles out if you have your phone, whatever it is. Matthew, if you're getting the physical Bible out, it is the first book of the New Testament. Okay, so a little bit more than halfway through the Bible, you'll find this book. And we're going to be starting in Matthew 8, 16 through 27 for those of you that are note takers. If you got your little notepads or whatever, Matthew 8, 16 through 27. It also can be found in Mark 4, 35 through 41, and Luke 8, 22 through 25. I know I just rattled a bunch of numbers off. That may sound like gibberish. I'm going to say it one more time if you're a note taker. It's found in Mark 4, 35 through 41, and Luke 8, 22 through 25. Now, I'm going to reference those a few times, but for the most part, we're going to stay right here in Matthew. And in Matthew, we're going to start out, it's chapter 8, verse 16, and we're going to just read a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of stop and break things down as we go, okay? All right, so here it goes. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him being Jesus. And he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first, let me go bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Now, before we even get into the story, right? We're in the story of the storm, that Jesus calming the storm. But before we even get there, I want to take us into this place when we're talking about faith, because there's a few key things that I want to point out that Jesus did before he even did this other miracle that we're going to be talking about. He drove out demon spirits, and he healed all, not some, not most, not a few, all with a word. Meaning he said a word, and they were healed, or the demon was drove out. And then it says this, and this is the interesting part, because I feel like there's things that are crucial when you look at the synoptic gospels, the things that are found in all three. And in all three accounts, we find this. We find in the other two, in Mark and in Luke, he gives, it's in the red letters, and he gives the instructions. But in Matthew, it says this, it says he gave orders to go to the other side. He gave orders. Like he's saying, let's go to the other side as an order. That's what we're going to do. But before he did that, he had two things happen. And the first was that there was this man who was a teacher of the law. And he was eager and he was willing. And he said, "No matter what, I'm going to follow after you." But Jesus quickly points us to this reference that is kind of confusing, right? He goes to his parables, which are kind of confusing in a way. And he says, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." He goes to this place as far as just letting him know. He wants to break in like, hey, like, have you really considered or counted the cost of following me? Right? He jumps right into that. He wants to let him know right off the get-go. He wants to let him know, like, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And he says the foxes have dens and the birds have nests. And what does that even mean? And if you look at the commentary on it, it's basically saying that he is taking a lower position, right, than the animals. Right? He's saying he has less luxuries afforded to him than animals do as far as having a place to lay his head. He doesn't have a place to lay his head. He said, if you're following after me, there's some things you got to know. Later on, just 2 chapters later, he's breaking down to his disciples how it is to follow him. And he breaks it down, and he uses this symbolism that we hear a lot. And he says this, he said, "Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me." He says this in Matthew 10:38. And the thing is when we think about cross nowadays, and you may have heard this before, but when we think of a cross now, it's a symbol of hope. right? We wear it proudly around our necks, a symbol of hope, a symbol of our salvation, a symbol of what we get through Jesus. And there's a positive aspect to it. We don't think about what it meant in his time because he hadn't gone to the cross yet. So when he throws this out to the disciples that are about to be following him, he's making it clear. He's saying, if you're going to follow after me, you need to pick up your cross daily. And cross back then meant an excruciating torture device. And he's saying, if you follow after me, you're gonna have some tough times, and people are not going to just accept you. And if you read in Matthew 10, he breaks down some other things that if you go into a town, they do not accept you, and he goes into detail. And this is where we find ourselves when we honestly come into this idea of faith. This is where we find ourselves. Because when we hear this idea of Jesus and we hear this awesome, gracious, amazing gift of salvation, we get excited and we're eager. And most of us, when we became born again, we were pumped up. We were like, God, I'll follow you wherever you take me. I'll go wherever you lead me. I will do whatever you ask. And we're telling everybody about it, and we're devoted. We're reading our Bibles. We're all in worship. We're staying in that place. Right? And this is where we are too when we follow after Jesus. And he just wanted to give this guy a check. He just wanted to warn him, hey, you're excited because think, he just healed all the people who were brought to him. So this teacher, maybe it was him. Or maybe it was a family member. Maybe it was his son or his daughter or somebody that was close to him that just got healed. And he saw this and he was blown away by this concept. And he's like, oh, Jesus, I want to follow you. Right? Just out of response. And Jesus checks this. He checks this would-be follower. Right? This would-be follower. Everybody say with me, if I'm losing some of you, would-be follower. Right? Would-be follower. Now then he goes into this other would-be follower. And this other would-be follower, we would all probably consider to have good intentions. Right? His good intention was hey, Lord, first, can I go bury my father? Now the commentary on this says that his father may not have passed away yet, but he may have been sick. And it just made my mind think, and this is just something to think about, but I was like, why didn't he just bring his dad to him? But some people think he was already passed away, but it may be a while before and it was a tradition, it was something that you were supposed to do. A burial rituals that they did as Jewish people was an important thing for those who passed away that they loved. And Jesus says to him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Now, this is where the other would-be follower, this is the other thing that we might, this is how some people, when they hear this idea of Christ, this is how some of us react. Right? We hear this idea of salvation, and that sounds great. That sounds awesome and all. But then we hear some of the conditions. And we hear some of the things that he says out, some of the expectations that Jesus lays out. Or we hear this verse, and we think, man, that's a harsh, cruel, unreasonable request to be asking that of somebody. Right? To just follow me and leave your dad. And some of us say in this moment, or some of us when we hear about Jesus, we get to this place of being like, man, this is too much. Or maybe for you, you can understand the Jesus thing as a man, like he was a good man. Right? He went and he loved on people. And so you hear about Jesus, and that's your faith in him is I just think he was a good man that a lot of people followed. But this resurrection thing, this raising from the dead, these miracles, these healing the blind and the lame and driving out demons, that's too much for me. That's a little too much. And then the next one is, he says this. He says, but first, this same guy. And if we fall into this camp, maybe we're on this page with our faith. It's but first, Jesus, I know you're calling me into this ministry or that ministry. I know you're calling me to quit my job. I know you're calling me to actually serve you wholeheartedly and be all in. But first, can I go take care of this thing? Or but first, let me get my life together. Or, but first, let me chase this goal and this dream that I have, and then later on, I'm going to serve you. Once I get all that together, I'm going to serve you. But I'm young, right? I'm young. All my friends are out drinking, partying. They're not married. They're not, and I want to kind of experience that. I want to do that. But first, let me do that. And I would say that Jesus is trying to convey something to us in this passage prior to even getting to the next step. right? He checks the disciples' hearts right where they're at, and he checks our hearts as well if we're reading this. When we read this, he has this idea is, before we follow him, have we counted the cost? Have we really counted the cost? And are we willing to put him above everything else? Like above our family, above our dreams, our goals, our ambitions, our fun that we have in mind. And these disciples that were here, the ones who followed him, had heard Jesus say this, and they had to think about that as well before they stepped with him and followed his orders to get into the boat to go to the other side. Now we're going to jump back in, and we're in chapter 8 still, and we're in verses 23 and 24, and it says this. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. Whenever we consider following after Jesus, with those conditions that I just laid out, right? When we're contemplating this faith thing, and we are would-be followers, we have to make the choice of whether we are going to follow him or not. And when we make that choice to follow him, then this is us entering then into faith in Christ. This is us saying, we are going to follow you. We're going to get in the boat and go to the other side with you. Now, if we're symbolically speaking, the other side might be, death and going to the other side, going with him and having him with us in this life to lead us into the next life. Right? That's if we're talking symbolically. But we're talking literally with these disciples. These disciples literally were getting into a boat with him and following him to the other side. Now, when they jump into the boat, they have this idea. There's this idea that comes up as far as, for me, when I was reading this, just thinking about, is this is us when we accept Christ. When we step into our faith, when we step into believing in Jesus, this is us. This is what we do. When we consider this idea of him, and we allow ourselves to follow after him, and he directs and dictates our life, this is us now saying, we're going to allow you to take this boat wherever it is that you're taking us, and we're in it with you. And so the question for us today, and the question that we have is, will you follow Jesus into the boat? Like, where's your faith at? I'm not sure. Most of you here, hopefully, have already made that step. You've already made that step of, yeah, I'm following him into that boat. I've considered what it costs. I've considered that. I've considered that I got to put him above all else. He is my Lord and my Savior. And then hopefully most of you guys have said that, but first you're like, no, but now. And then you've considered that other idea of this is too much. You're thinking, no, this is all that I want. This is it. I'm chasing after this guy, man. He does stuff that no one else does. I want to follow him. I want to be in. I'm in this boat with him. But here's the thing. When we answer that question and we become believers, there's this misconception, I think, and sometimes I've been guilty of this as well, that we are just going to be able to go, all these problems that we have magically disappear because we got Jesus in the boat with us. But if you follow the story, you're saying, I'm following you, Jesus. He gives this order, come follow me. Okay, I'm following you, and you get in the boat, and immediately it says, in the verse, it says, suddenly a furious storm comes up. And isn't that true for us? Isn't that just true in life in general? Right? There's this famous saying, and you've probably heard it before, but there's this famous saying that says, everyone is either going into a storm, in the middle of a storm, or coming out of a storm. Right? When we think about this life, this is the guarantee that we're going to have. And as we're going through these storms, problems don't just magically disappear when we decide to get in the boat with Jesus. But doesn't it feel like sometimes, and maybe you've been on this Christian walk and you've been in this boat for a long time, and these storms keep popping up, and depending on where you're at, sometimes doesn't it feel like the waves and the ebbs and flows of life, that sometimes Jesus is like falling asleep? Like it feels like he's falling asleep in the boat. You're like, hey, I'm following you. You're the one who led me here, and I'm in the middle of this storm, but what's going on? Right? Because what happens is we get to this place, and storms hit, and they hit sometimes hard. Sometimes they hit us unexpectedly. We're okay with storms when they're self-inflicted. Self-inflicted storm would be, I got in a bad relationship. It's my fault. If you decided to drink and then drive and you get in a car wreck, that's kind of on you. And we're okay with accepting those. It's those ones that come up out of nowhere and blindside us. And those are the ones that we most get to the place of being like, whoa, Jesus, I thought you You were leading me in this. Like I thought I was following you. Like I thought you were the one who was directing the course, and you're leading me head first into the storm. And then we get in this storm, and it feels like he's sleeping at the wheel. It feels like that he's not really paying attention. Sometimes you may not even feel his presence in the boat with you. Because wouldn't that be the one thing that would be a reassurance in this place? Being in the middle of a storm on this tiny little fishing boat, wouldn't the one thing that would be reassuring would be to know that you had Jesus in the boat with you? Right? And when we first become Christians, we understand this. When we first become believers, we get this. We get in the boat and we're like, Jesus is by me. Nothing can take me down. I'm good. And but then as we're going through it, you're like, man, these waves are making me sick. And you're getting to the places you're like, oh gosh, I'm going to puke. And then like, oh great, another storm. Like, what's going on? And sometimes we feel like, Jesus, did you bail out back there? Because you were getting seasick too. And all these storms keep coming and they keep coming. They keep coming. Like, did you bail out? Did you leave me? Did you fall asleep at the wheel? Like, am I still in the boat? Am I still following you? My story goes something like this. When I was actually 17, 9 days before my 18th birthday, my dad passed away suddenly. Right? Just out of nowhere, he had a stroke from a blood clot. He was doing the electric slide. Anybody know how to do the electric slide? No one has ever taught me, so I want to do it, but not really. It's electric. Sorry. I'm throwing a joke to see who's still awake. So, you're doing this electric slide thing, and then he has a heart attack out of nowhere. And I could remember the phone call that I got and the gut-wrenching feeling that I had. And the thing that blew me away by this more than anything was I had physical pain in my chest that I couldn't explain. Like, why should it actually physically hurt? And I cried, and I could remember just being broken like never before. At that point, my parents had divorced, and then, I thought that was bad. I had moved out on my own at this point. I'm a 17-year-old kid trying to learn how to be a man. My dad dies right before my 18th birthday. And 3 months later, I get a phone call that my mom has stage 4 colorectal cancer. I'm living in my best friend's house, 2,000 miles away from her, and I get this news that my mom is got this cancer. And I've been through some storms. I'm telling you, I've had some things happen. My sister passed away in 2013. All my grandparents are gone. So you may be thinking like, who's this young guy out there? Who's this young guy trying to teach us about storms? He don't know nothing about it. And I'll be honest, I don't know your storm. I don't. I haven't been in every storm. In fact, I don't get all of them. I don't get the majority of them. But I do know what it's like to hurt. I do know what it's like to be in my storms. And man, I'm telling you, it's a place where you should feel really good. Right? Maybe some of you are in the midst of it right now. It should feel really good to know you got Jesus next to you, but sometimes, man, it just feels silent. And it just feels like you're in it on your own. And sometimes it feels like he ordered you and you got in the boat and then he sent you out into the middle of the lake to drown. Right? The thing about this story, and we're going to go into it, when we get to this place, we aren't the first people to feel this way. The disciples had the literal Christ on the boat with them, and they had feelings of doubt. I'm not the first person to be in this place. You're not the first person to be in this place. They had literal Christ on the boat with them, and he was actually asleep. Just happens to be, he was literally asleep. Like he was sleeping on the boat. And they're going through this thing, and they're like, they come to him, and we're in verse 25 now. It says, the disciples went and woke him, and they said to him, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Like they were worried that they were going to drown. You know why? Because they were no different than you and no different than I in this sense, is they thought that Jesus was leading them into a place to go into a storm to drown in the middle of a lake. Now that is a place where we have to be careful as believers. Because when we get out there in the middle of that lake, right, normally when trouble comes, when a storm comes, if it's on land, right, you go into shelter. If a tornado is coming to blow your house down, right, what do we all do? Shelter in place. We find the safest place, usually in a basement. And if you don't have a basement, you go into some closet and you pray to God and you're like, dear God, please let this bathtub not kill me, right? And you get to that place. But we get in this place of shelter. But it's very, very different when you're in a tiny little fishing boat in the middle of a lake by yourself. There's really no shelter you can go in. Am I right? There's no shelter in the middle of a lake on a small little fishing boat if a storm just blasts. There's no safe place. But there should be this kind of knowing when we have Jesus on the boat with us. In the boat by yourself is totally different than in a boat with Jesus in there with you. And I think in the middle of a storm, this is where we get. We get to the place that we don't really feel like he's there with us. But the disciples, they had a lack of faith in this moment. Right? And Jesus was not going to let them all drown. And we're going to see in this next verse what happens. He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he simply got up, he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And I asked myself, why did they go to Jesus in this moment? Why did they go to Jesus? They were scared. But they had him on the boat with them, that's why. They're like, oh yeah, remember that guy who healed everybody that came to him with just his word? Like, oh, and every single person, not just some, all that came to him, he just said one word and they were healed. Remember that guy? Oh yeah, he's on the boat with us. Let's say something to him. But the problem was they were so afraid. Their doubt was that they thought he was leading them into just destruction and that they were just all going to drown on his boat. They kind of forgot for a moment that he was in there with them and that he had the power to do so. So they did so kind of out of desperation, but out of accessibility. Do you know he's accessible to you in the middle of your storm? See, this thing of faith, this idea of faith is trust. And it's more than that, though. It's more than that. It's trust with an implication that actions may follow based on that trust. You trusted him. You said, I'm going to follow after you. And you step in the boat. And the actions that would follow, if he was a good, loving, caring God, would not be, and a saving Savior who's full of grace and full of mercy, would not be to lead you into the middle of a lake where you have nowhere to go for shelter and let you sit out there and drown. That's not the actions that would follow. And that's what he's condemning in the disciples. And that's what he hurts when we get in storms and we forget. Because a lot of times what storms do is they push us away from Jesus. And they make us doubt him more. And then a lot of times people just completely turn from their faith altogether. And I'll be honest, in my story, I was more like those disciples. I had this amnesia, like, oh yeah, Jesus is here. He can take care of these storms. So when my mom passed away, it was about 3.5 years after she was diagnosed. I was in college. I lived in Las Vegas. I was going to UNLV. The Running Rebels. Any Rebel fans? No, not here. So I'm by myself in that too. Thanks, guys. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm out on this boat by myself on this island. I moved back here so I could be with my mom. And I'm in a place where I don't know. And I had this girlfriend back home, right? I had this girlfriend I was dating for like 4.5 years. And when you're 20 or 21 years old, you're thinking about marriage. You're thinking about that. And I was with her for 4.5 years through the death of my dad. Like, she was one of the core things in my life too. And I had already lost one of the main core things, which was my dad. And now my mom, she was sick with cancer. So that core thing was about to leave. One of the fundamental things for me was about to leave. And then she breaks up with me as I'm living out here helping my mom and going through the passing of my mom. 2 months before my mom passes away, the girl that my first love, she breaks up with me, and now I'm really feeling alone on this boat. And I'm feeling so alone, and I feel like, man, what the heck? Why? God, I feel like I'm following you. I just wanted to be there for my mom, and I'm like, why don't you just heal her? She would be the most like go-getter. She would tell everybody, and she would give complete glory to you if you would just heal her. And I prayed and I fasted, and I'm telling you, I just felt like when she finally passed away, I felt like that silence, like that deafening silence was real. And I'm telling you, I felt alone on this boat. I'm going to read something to you. I brought this little thing up here. I just happened to be looking for tax papers this year, but God has a funny way of doing things when it comes to our lives, right? He has a funny way of showing us things that we would never find on our own. I seriously was looking for tax papers. I was freaking out about getting our taxes done. I couldn't find them anywhere, and I come across this little handy-dandy notebook. And this is November 17th of 2007. My mom passed away in May 17th, 2007. So this excerpt that I found and I came across was 6 months to the day of my mom's passing. And this was in the middle of the storm, and this is what I said. I still haven't heard anything back from the fire department. I'm getting over anxious and stressed out. I'm sick of where I'm at. I want to start a new life. That I could forget about this past and start fresh. I still question if this is where God wants me to be. I pray things improve and He puts His hand on my situation. I don't care if I get this job or not. I just want to be in His will either way. So God, please guide me and allow me to have this job if it's where you want me to be. Also give me peace with being single. Sometimes I get so lonely and want companionship. Prepare a wife for me that is acceptable in your eyes, that will love me for life. And when the time is right, reveal her to me. Thank you for all you are doing and all you have already done. Amen. And I share that with you because, not because I feel like, that I can't relate to you. I was in the midst of it. And some of you guys, like I said, we're all either going into one, in the middle of one, or coming out of one. But I was feeling the way the disciples did, man. I was feeling in a place of hopelessness. I was more like those men in the boat. But my favorite part about this story, the best part about this story, the part that is the most inspirational to me and that I can relate to, is this. It says, the men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. The Mark account says it this way. They said they were terrified. And Luke says in fear and amazement. See, they had this reverent fear now, and it wasn't about the storm anymore. There was a shift in that moment. When Jesus spoke and those waves and that storm was stopped in its tracks, their fear shifted instantly. Because they at that point they were like, whoa, well, who is this guy? Who is this guy at this moment? We're dying, we're about to drown. And I want to point out, this is very important to know. These aren't like guys who've never been in a boat before. These aren't guys who's never experienced, going on a boat like you or me. We might be like, oh my goodness, this is scary. And right, and they talk about when you first get in a boat, you get seasickness really bad. No, these are experienced fishermen. These are guys who have been in a boat many, many, many times. A lot of them were fishermen. His disciples, a lot of them, and they lived off this lake in the Sea of Galilee, and this is their livelihood. This is where they got their food. It was something that they were all familiar with. This wasn't a tiny little storm that they came across. They have been in those before. This one was huge. This one was so much that they had fear that they were going to die and drown. There was waves coming over. In those boats, they were only about 27 feet long, about 8 feet wide. You could fit, I looked all into it. There about 15 people maybe on one of these boats. So all 12 of the disciples could have been there with Jesus. And they are in a place where they're trying to just stay upright. Now, I think it's important because this wasn't a small storm. Now, when you see Him take you through a storm like this, and you come out the other side, right? When you see what He does through a storm, the thing that you thought was the worst thing that you've ever been through, when you've encountered this kind of storm, and then you come out and the other side is the greatest blessing that you could ever have, then you too will start to have this kind of different, reverent fear. Not of the storms of this life, but of the one who could absolutely put a stop to it at any second. So, this wasn't the first time that these disciples doubt Jesus either. It wasn't the first nor the last time that they doubt him. They doubt what Jesus is able to do. They doubt what he says is going to be true. Right? There's times where he said to Peter, he rebukes Peter and says, "Get behind me, Satan," to one of his disciples. Like, say that to your best friend, see how that goes. Get behind me, Satan. But there's one thing that they found out, and if you decide to follow after his order, if you decide to jump in the boat and follow after him, there's one thing you'll find out in your path of faith. As you're walking, you're going to have some doubts, man. And you're going to actually get to a storm that you've never hit before, and you're going to be like, this is the one I'm going to sink on. And then he's going to do something, he's going to give some peace in it that you never thought possible. And you know what it does in those moments? And this is what he did for the disciples. The disciples followed him and continued to doubt him. Doubting Thomas did even after he was resurrected from the dead. Like he was like, nah, unless I get to touch those holes, I don't believe it. The guy who's seen him walk on water, seen him calm a storm, seen him heal, hundreds, thousands, still was like, I got to poke those holes. That was his thing. For some reason, he was like a literalist. He's like, no, I got to see him. I got to touch him. Like, this is a little too much for me. And God has a way of taking our storms and doing that for us. If you're in the middle of the storm, a lot of times he's taking you away from everything else. And he kind of wants to leave you in this place of feeling isolated so that you would learn for once and for all, that he is the one who's in control of it and could stop it and could overcome it and could turn it into a blessing. Y'all can clap for that because that's awesome. That is a thing that we got to realize, that he is able to take that place that we're in. He's able to take the most devastating circumstance that you've ever faced, and he's able to show you that he's in the boat with you. If you would just cling to it. The disciples went to him out of desperation and out of just accessibility because he was in the boat with them. And I have to say, man, if you're in that boat and you don't have him in that boat with you, that's a scary place to be. We go to shelter when we're in a storm. If you're in a storm today, if you're in the middle of one of those times, don't leave here without clinging to him. Don't leave here without going to the shelter, because he is that shelter. The Bible tells us this verse. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. That's Romans 10:17. And here's the thing. This is so important because when he continues to show you that he's there for you, when he steps into your life time and time again, when he steps up in big moments that you think that you can't possibly go on, when he comes in and changes circumstances that you possibly don't think are going to change, when you're in these ugly storms and he steps in and shows you, then all of a sudden your faith increases. I stand up here boldly today because of the fact that he has changed my faith. I'm on the other side of that storm now. And man, has he been ever faithful. I was bragging about my in-laws, and that might sound like it was just like service, right? Like just service to them. They're my in-laws, you got to do that. No, I'm serious when I say it. God brought Shay and Bobby into my life. Like they are parents to me. Like I lost my mom and my dad. Like I lost my family. And they are the best parents to me. And he brought Chastity into my life, and she is the best wife. And I couldn't imagine my life another way. But you know what? I would have never took that path on my own. I would have never went that direction. And a lot of times he takes us in these storms because he's like, dude, you're going the way opposite direction you should be. You said you're following me, right? Okay, all right. You don't see the other side of this storm. You don't see it yet. But I'm telling you, just follow me. I got you. And I'm telling you, I was in a place where I didn't think that I was going to find love. I felt alone. I didn't have companionship. I felt in a place in the middle of the country. I came from Las Vegas, y'all. This place is tiny, and it is like not what I grew up in, and so it was uncomfortable. In fact, I moved here when I was a junior. I hated it so much that I moved away from my mom, and I'm a mama's boy. When I was 17, I moved away out of my house to live with my best friend because I hated this place so much. If you don't believe me, if that isn't evidence, I don't know what is. I absolutely couldn't stand y'all. I'm just kidding. In fact, I joke like that. I actually found something that I didn't think I needed or wanted. And this place has people that love on you. You know, because I found another set of parents, of parent-like figures in my life in Rick and Rebecca. And I can't look at them because I'll cry. But they come every time I preach. And they were my mom's best friend, my mom and stepdad's best friend. And they're here, and they have become like parents on that side. And Chastity always says, I feel like I'm missing, my in-laws because your mom and dad aren't here. But they get a piece of that through Rick and Rebecca. And they spoil my kids, and they love on me way more than I deserve. And again, I'm not just saying this is lip service to this. I'm trying to tell you all where my storm went and how I came out the other side. And I'm telling you, I came out better for it. I'm telling you, He led me, and I continue to follow Him because I know without a shadow of a doubt. It doesn't matter what science somebody tries to bring in my life. They could be like, oh, God isn't real. We found hardcore evidence. And I'd say, that's a lie because I've watched it. I've seen it in my own life. You can't hinder my faith. And that's what happened to the disciples. They were not ready to go and be hung, and they were not ready to be martyrs at first. Remember when Jesus went to the cross, what'd they do? They scattered, they fled, they were scared. Even though they saw some of the stuff they did, they were like, oh, I don't know. Like, you know Jesus? No, I'm not going through what He just went through. But something happened. He came back, He rose from the dead, and He changed the situation so much so that they were all willing to say, no, you can't change my faith. Nope. I'm going to preach, I'm going to say it, and it doesn't matter what you say. It is true, and I know it's true. I watched it, I witnessed it, I know it. It's in my heart, my soul. There's nothing that can rock this. And they didn't just get there just out of nowhere. It's because time and time again they saw Christ's faithfulness through all the storms that they went in. They went in jail, He broke them out. So much so that they had so much faith that the shadow of Peter or Paul and the rags that they touched, if it just touched somebody, would heal them. Man, they were in some sort of crazy faith. And when we talk about this idea of doubting today, I don't know where you're at. I don't know where your faith's at. I can't speak for you. I can't say where you've been. I can't speak to the fact that you may have had some horrible storms happen. I don't know. But the one thing I do know is if you cling to Him and His faithfulness, He will always come through on the other side. I think I kind of went through this. I'm going to jump backwards a little bit. Psalm 121, verse 2 says this: my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. John 16:33, Jesus is talking and He says this: I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Deuteronomy 31, 6 and 8, and in Joshua 1 and 5. So you can just see that it's all over the Bible. I took a passage, this is one in Psalms, is kind of in the middle, John towards the end, Deuteronomy is in the beginning, that you could see that this God is the same throughout. And He says this, He says, He will never leave you or forsake you. And so here we are today, and I don't know where you're at, but what voices are you listening to? Like, what do you need to lean on today? What are you going through? Are you in the middle of a storm? Are you doubting? And are you out on that boat all by yourself trying to figure it out? Or maybe you're a Christian and you've been a Christian a long time, but you're like, man, I just don't know on this one. Man, I'm with you. I've been in that place. I've been to the place of feeling like I don't know if I'm going to make it out the other side. And if you're a Christian today and you're going through this and you're finding yourself leaning on or listening to other things and you're finding yourself and your faith fading and you're going in the different direction, can I caution you? Can I give you just some words? Can I just tell you all that the best plan for a storm is to get to the shelter, and when you're in the middle of it, in the middle of a lake, on a tiny little fishing boat, and you're all by yourself, that's a scary place. And there's really not really anywhere you can turn. Can I tell you that He's faithful in it? One of the versions says, peace, be still, is Jesus' words. And I think a lot of times what happens for us when we get in the middle of these storms, what we need to just do is just have some peace and be still and listen and go to Him. When I was in the middle of my storm, I could remember coming up to the altar at my church and crying my eyes out to the place where I was embarrassed to get up because my face, it was that ugly cry. You know what I'm saying? That like, and it's everywhere, and you got snot, and you got tears everywhere. And I can remember, and I did it even here at this church at times. And I would stand up, and I remember looking out into the crowd, and people, I know somebody was judging me, like, man, what's that guy going through? And I could, you feel those eyes on you, and it makes you almost not want to come up, and it makes you want to stay back, and it makes you not want to do that. Can I encourage you, though, that that's important? It's important that you find Him in these moments. That's an important thing, that you cling to Him in these moments. Look, no one's judging you here. If you come up, people aren't going to be like, oh, look at the worst sinner ever. Look at him. And he's crying hard, so he must got a lot. And shame on you if you're thinking that. When we come here, we're here because we're saying, look, I need Jesus. And some of you all need Him more than others. And I'm not saying like you're more, I'm saying some of you all are in the middle of a storm. And I feel like we come in here sometimes. But you could do this at home too. There was times at home where I was on my knees, on my face in tears. Make sure you're doing that and not running from Him. Because I think a lot of times we're like, I can handle this. I got this. I can do this on my own. You're going to just leave me out here on this storm? That's how it's going to be? And we get to that place of just being mad or frustrated. And we're like, He doesn't even exist. He's asleep at the wheel. And I just want to give you all my testimony that I've come out the other side and I've watched it where I felt like my life just fell apart. And He picked it back up and He put it together better than I ever could. And now I'm living in a blessed life that I don't deserve. And it's because of Him. And it would be such a shame if I didn't give Him the credit for it. If I were to say that it was me, I did this. No. It was all those times I was on my face. It was all those times I was like, God, I can't. I'm lost. I don't know what else to do. If that's you today, please don't miss this opportunity. We're here for you. We'll pray with you. We'll take you out. I'll take you out for a cup of coffee because you think I'm a bad guy because I called my in-laws idiots. And I know Bobby and Shay have the same heart. In fact, I know my faith is where it is today because of them, because of my wife, because of Jordan. I gained a true family in a place where I couldn't stand and I thought I was all by myself. And I want you guys to know you're invited to that too. When you come here to this church, we want to take you in. We want you to be a part of our family, man. If you're going through something, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not alone in this life. There will be trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Jesus said that, not me. I can't help you with that, but I could try to help lead you to Him. Please, if you're going through something today, don't leave here without doing it. We're going to go into a time of communion. And Jordan is going to lead us in that song, Peace Be Still. And I want us to realize who we have in the boat with us. Because when you feel isolated from God, the isolation that we feel, you want to know what that is? That's like, oh, you're God. You're sitting in heaven. You've never experienced what I've experienced. Like, you're in a perfect place and you're in control of everything and everything listens to you and listens to what you say. And so, of course, that is an isolating place to think like, oh, that's the guy, I got to try to be one with him. And that is where it's so powerful to think about this idea that Jesus is in the boat with us. And Jesus does know about some stuff. He does know about some trials. He wasn't born rich. He was born poor as can be. And he was born in this tiny little farm area where he was sat into and left in a small place by himself with his parents that weren't rich, that weren't wealthy, and grew up with a carpenter as a dad, and he had some things, but he went through these trials with us. Like, he knows what it's like to be betrayed. He was betrayed by one of his best friends. And he knows what it's like to be denied. And he knows what it's like to suffer, right? Because he went through the most excruciating form of torture and execution. Like, you don't have this separation from God because we have, and the Bible tells us in this verse, it says, therefore, since we have a great high priest, referring to Jesus, who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. That's the God that we serve. One who said, I got to step down into this and let them know I'm with them. So much so that he stepped down in here on this planet in the lowest position. And he didn't have a place to rest his head. He wanted to take the lowest of low. He didn't want to exalt himself. He could have easily done that, and that wouldn't have been the same. But he wanted to show us that, hey, I've been through it. And those same people, he healed all of them. All of them that came, he healed them. And they weren't small healings. It was like, that guy can't walk. He hasn't been able to walk for 30 years. He's walking. This guy's never seen. He can see. This guy's never heard. He can hear. And he did these amazing miracles. And then the same people that he did all this for, freed a prisoner and sent him to a cross. And along the way, they spit on him. And he was whipped and he was scourged and he was beaten. And then he got to that place, and he's on the cross, and you would think he would be angry. You think he'd be disgusted. And he said, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that was the place where he was coming to forgive us of our sins. And he went through all of that so he could relate with us. In your boat today, I don't know what you got going on, but he does, and he's been through the worst of it. We're going to take communion. This is our reminder. This is our way of really just checking where we're at. I gave you those things. I don't know where you're at. I don't know where you're at with your faith. Maybe you've never had a storm, and maybe like this idea of Jesus has never been something for you, and you're like, but first I want to do this stuff, but all of a sudden now you've been hit with the storm, and you don't know what to do. If that's you, step in that boat. Maybe you've been one that's followed him for a long time, and you're getting tired because you've actually been trying to do it all on your own. Right? You've been in the boat so long you forgot who's the one really leading the way. I don't know what it is for you. But as we take this communion now, I just want you guys to really, really, really just think about what God is saying to you in this moment. And if you're one that needs to come up and cry right here at this altar, it's open. If you need to do something and get something right between you and God today, make sure you take the time to do it. If you need prayer, you can come forward. I'll pray with you. I know Junior, Brian, we've got Trent, we've got tons of people here that will pray for you if you need that. But don't leave this place without trying to figure that out today. All right. God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for the fact that your truth is so powerful. It transcends everything. Your truth has a way of getting into a heart and really just turning and prying things that we didn't even know were there. Your words have a way of just changing our souls. God, I pray as we take communion today, we don't forget the fact that our lives are forever changed because of what you did on that cross. God, that we're able to make it through the storms because you say, I have overcome the world. Well, the way you did that was stepping up on that cross. And now our sins and our shortcomings and our doubts, we don't have to worry about because we have you right alongside us. And we have you as our Savior and our Lord. God, let us turn to you today in all that we do. In your name we pray. Amen.